What is going on, investors? Hopefully, guys are doing well out there. That is right. It is a 3-day weekend. It is Friday, and it is time for the FAANG Stock Recap Show here on the Investor Channel, where every Friday they lock me in a bunker and we talk about all the major FAANG stocks and the technical chart patterns. And we've got a lot of news to talk about this week, so we better not waste any more time and kick things off like we always do with the Meta platform. Started the week at 287, and like all these stocks pretty much had a very nice week, up nearly 3% to finish the week, over $296 per share. Canada is tweaking their Online News Act legislation to address concerns from Meta and Google over the country's planned attempt to make the social media and search giant pay for different types of content that they link to for certain news organizations. Now, the country is looking for monetary and non-monetary contributions that take into account pre-existing deals that Meta and Google already have with a lot of news outlets. Meta and Google could see a new digital service tax in the great country of New Zealand starting in 2025. That would be a 3% gross tax on New Zealand digital service revenue. This is similar to other countries such as France and the UK, which have similar type of tax laws. It looks like over 4 years, you can raise upwards of 222 million New Zealand dollars, I guess. And that sounds like a lot of money, no matter what the currency is. Moving on to Apple. Started the week at 179, finished the week well north of 5.6% higher. Finished the week over $189 per share. A lot of news with Apple this week, including the fact that the company set a September 12th event launch date for its iPhone 15 and more. So we're just 11 days away from getting that new iPhone 15 product launch. I'll be sure to watch that event and report back on anything that I see there. Now, analysts are thinking that the company has room to raise the price on their iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max phones. These are $1,000 upwards of maybe $1,100, maybe even higher than that, the more memory that you add on here. Complicating the situation are probably two factors. Number one, these devices are largely subsidized, so raising the price, I guess the customer doesn't necessarily feel that, and so Apple could consider doing that. We'll also see competition from Google later this show, where we talk about their Pixel 8 phone coming out. There's obviously other competing devices. There's also the competition of you just keeping the phone that you already have. Also, the student loan fiasco or drama, whatever you want to call it. It looks like you're actually going to have to start paying those here relatively soon. And so that's a large segment of this customer base. We'll see what Apple decides to do. I would probably assume that the company will probably stick to pricing relatively where it is at, considering the phones are largely subsidized. On the iPhone 15, the company was facing some issues with some manufacturing and mass production. This is very typical with the company, as they have different, usually kind of glass and sensor issues. I'm sure the company will have that worked out here very soon. Very interesting story here, as it says Apple is said to be testing 3D printers to make devices. Now, Apple and virtually all contract manufacturers probably do a lot of testing, a lot of prototyping on 3D devices, but what they're finding is they might use 3D printers to make the steel chassis used in some of its upcoming Apple watches. This obviously would shift the manufacturing landscape tremendously if Apple went to 3D printers. Conceivably, you could set those up like data centers here in the United States, or really anywhere in the world for that matter, and start printing parts. This has been the promise of 3D printing since the sector was really hot. I think it was almost 10 years ago. 3D printing was as hot as AI was or is, and it kind of more or less fell by the wayside. There's a couple of major 3D printers. I'm not recommending you go out and buy any of these companies, but this was the promise of 3D printing, and it could be that just around the corner, it is ready to deliver. Now, Apple also said to press its suppliers to solve those Apple Vision Pro display issues that we talked about not too long ago. The company is having problems with its micro OLED technology that it's not only expensive, but very difficult to produce. That's why OLED TVs tend to be a little bit more expensive than maybe LCD TVs. There's a lot of error rate and a lot of waste when it comes to manufacturing. And obviously, when you're looking at a curved display and a brand new form factor, I tell you what, Apple's going to have to sell a boatload of these to make really any profit. Now, Apple said to unveil major changes, we'll put that in air quotes, to its iPad Pro next year. Essentially what is reported, you might get a small screen size increase on the large end. You maybe see a little bit of a different keyboard, and they'll just cram the M3 chip in there. I don't think that's a lot of major changes, although the device is already pretty much fantastic. I have one sitting right here, and I highly recommend it if you're looking for an iPad. Moving on to Amazon. Start of the week at $132 per share, up over 4% to finish the week. About $138 per share. Amazon's One Medical CEO to step down later this year. My guess is this was the kind of the plan more or less all along. Amazon acquired One Medical not too long ago, and typically in these scenarios, the executives kind of stay on during the transition process. Sometimes you see them stay on for a little bit longer than that, but this is a great way to get what they call cost synergies. You kick out the high-priced CEO, give him a little bit of a golden parachute, maybe some shares in Amazon as well, and he goes on his way a richer man, and One Medical has lower operating costs that they have to deal with. Amazon continues its hot streak as analysts eye an AWS event this fall as a potential catalyst for the shares that would occur on November 27th. I think just in general, Amazon moving into its fourth quarter have a lot of catalyst and a lot of attention on the company. Amazon is under pressure by the FDA for selling, quote, unapproved drugs. This is through third-party sellers, which the company is constantly having to deal with. And anytime a third-party seller does something wrong, Amazon tends to get the blame for it. That's why if you sell on Amazon, boy, there's a lot of hoops and a lot of restrictions that you have to go through. Amazon CEO told its corporate workers that you need to come back to the office or else. This is a great way to kind of purge employees, I think, a little bit. If you want to fire these people anyways, this is a great way to get maybe a certain percentage of people that want to work at home or continue to work at home. Now, this is not a 5-day-a-week thing. He's looking for just 3 days per week. The last time that Andy Jassy requested this, the soy milk and avocado toast eating employees of Amazon cried out into the streets where there are people that are struggling with addiction and homelessness, and these people with six-figure jobs got in those same streets and complained about having to come into an office for work. I applaud Andy Jassy for making these people come back. The stats are clear. Initially, you had a productivity increase as it related to working from home, but those stats continue to show that workers that work at least partially in an office, particularly as it relates to onboarding and team building, people that work in an office actually work better and more productive than most people that work at home. Moving on to Netflix. So the week at $4.15 and some change, up 5 3/4% to finish the week very close to $440 per share. Hollywood studios could potentially cut streamers out of a Hollywood strike negotiation with a big giant question mark. Could that actually happen? Could you get the big boys, the old majors of Disney, NBC, and Paramount say, hey, let's negotiate a deal that basically kicks Netflix, Apple, and Amazon to the curb? That would be very interesting if not only you have a divide in Hollywood between the writers and the actors on one side and the studios and the streamers on the other side, if we divide this into a trifecta where you divide the Hollywood studios of the old linear TV networks and studios with the actors and writers, and then you have the streamers kind of on the side as well, my God, Hollywood can be a bigger mess than it already is. No end in sight. That's what some people are thinking about. The Hollywood strike and new attempt by Hollywood CEOs are stepping in, trying to negotiate a strike that is now in its 122nd day with the writers and nearly 50 days for the great actors and actresses. Moving on to NVIDIA, start of the week at $457. This one, boom, up 6%. What else is new? NVIDIA's up on the week, up 6% to finish the week at $485, still off the all-time highs of about 502. So I guess there's more upside left in NVIDIA. The Biden administration says it has not blocked chip sales to the Middle East. This counteracts a press release that came out earlier in the week, which said that the Biden administration unveiled very similar sanctions that are on the Chinese government to block certain sales of high-powered GPUs from NVIDIA, along with lithography equipment from ASML, and bars some companies like TSM and others from manufacturing chips for the Chinese counterparts. It was believed that the Middle East, or some countries, not Middle East maybe broadly, but some of the countries in the Middle East fell in this basket. The Biden administration saying no. I think the Biden administration, needless to say, has some communication issues. They don't really communicate with the American people very effectively, or very often for that matter. And in these cases, not that great for business, in my opinion. NVIDIA-backed startup CoreWeave is said to raise money, valuing the firm up to $8 billion. CoreWeave is think of it as like an Amazon AWS for AI servers, and NVIDIA has been not only backing them from a financial perspective, but they've also been allocating them GPUs at a rate that's higher than Amazon and maybe even IBM and Microsoft and Google. I've been hearing that CoreWeave almost gets a priority shipment from NVIDIA, more or less a partner in that sense. And I actually think it's a great strategy from NVIDIA. Moving on to Google, started the week at 131. This went up nearly 3% to finish the week at about 135 and some change. The company set an October rollout date for its popular Pixel 8 phones. These phones have absolutely been picking up steam, not necessarily taking market share from Apple, but more or less taking market share from the other Android devices, including Samsung. Now, Google's Cloud Next announcement, this was actually kind of under the radar, but also very important as the company rolled out new AI tool chips and more. The company announced their new 5th generation tensor processing unit, otherwise known as a TPU. They've partnered with Broadcom to make those for many, many years. They teased their version 5E, which if they tease it, it means it's likely already in place and they're already working on probably a 6th version of it. Company noted it had higher performance times at half the cost. Very, very competitive. If you're looking at the GPU and kind of training marketplace, Google, outside of NVIDIA, absolutely a market leader, and by default, Broadcom as well. Also interesting in here is the company announced AI tools for its corporate Gmail accounts that will cost $30 per month. Ironically, the exact same amount that Microsoft is going to roll out their 365 Copilot. We'll certainly see this revenue likely hit these companies' financials early next year. Moving on to Microsoft, started the week at $324 per share, up 1.4%. Finished the week over $328 per share. Microsoft to unbundle Teams, which is essentially a Zoom competitor from Office, to fend off EU anti-competitive probe. So you're going to be able to access Team and use Teams without a 365 subscription. Microsoft back OpenAI said to surpass $1 billion in revenue. Not surprising, as I also subscribe to the service for $20 per month. They have a lot of monthly active users, producing nearly $80 million in monthly revenue. I tell you what, AI hit the scene right around this time last year, and we are just now seeing the revenue kind of hit and belong in the software sector. It all flowed to NVIDIA. What is NVIDIA? What do people buy in NVIDIA GPUs, guys? They're buying it to create products that generate $1 billion in revenue run rate. OpenAI had the head start in this. So guess what that means? That means you've got a long list of other companies that are going to follow this. Microsoft back OpenAI also introduced ChatGPT Enterprise. It's a very interesting market, as you've got enterprises that need guardrails and probably their own proprietary data to sit on these services. Currently, it's been mainly done by third parties using API access to ChatGPT, but ChatGPT jumping into that market. Moving on to Tesla. Start of the week at, we'll call that 240. Up and down week for the electric car maker, but finished the week, like all of these stocks, higher by north of 2% to finish the week at 245 and a penny. Tesla cut its prices in China yet again. However, that's a little bit deceiving because they rolled out a, quote, new Model 3 with longer range. So as they cut the price of the Model S and Model X, those are the more expensive models of Teslas, by about 14 and 21%, the new, quote, new price of the Model 3 is about 12% higher than the previous base model, but considering it probably has more range, likely has a higher cost of goods. If you want to know the difference between the two cars, this is a subtle refresh of the company's very popular Model 3 car. What's not seen here is there are some interior changes, although relatively subtle. What I've noticed what Tesla has done is they've kind of removed some complexity here to the bumper. There's a little plastic piece on the old Model 3. The headlights on the old Model 3 also a little bit larger. Looks like to me they're going to be able to make this car for maybe a little bit cheaper as they eliminated a few plastic parts in the front. Me personally, I have one of these, quote, old Model 3. I actually like the look of it maybe a little bit better, but obviously I could be considered biased. Tesla under DOJ investigation for building Musk a glass house. This is more or less kind of a recycled story that we've heard before. Looks like Elon Musk wanted to use some glass that Tesla had access to, and I'm sure Mr. Musk has the money to pay whatever fine the DOJ decides to levy him. I don't think he'll end up in jail, but the DOJ's doing its best to throw people in jail that it doesn't like. Now, moving over to the technical segment of the show, the S&P 500 bouncing off the middle. We have this middle of the bar channel in here, not for fun, but oftentimes what happens with channels and upper channels and stocks and markets in this case that are in these upper channels, the middle is also an inflection point. And what we've noticed really with the S&P 500 since the March, the middle is actually acting as support. And that's exactly what happened here. We've got a bounce on the S&P 500 right now. It looks like this one probably wants to retest, make a new high, probably north of 4,600 in the weeks ahead. Very bullish move by the S&P 500. Also, Meta making a bounce off a pretty reasonable area. There was some consolidation in the stock between 245 up to about where it is right now, about $300. There's some consolidation there, so you'd expect some buyers to step in. They have with Meta. Now you've got overhead support at 300. You've got further overhead support where the stock kind of tapped out at about 324. With Meta, you're looking for a break above that, and it might not really materialize till you get to the month of November or approaching the month of November when the company reports earnings again. Moving on to Apple, what is driving a lot of the S&P 500 gains is this stock's got a big weighting in there, and it made a big old reversal off a clear support level. When stocks break to all-time highs, don't be alarmed if they come back into a back test. In fact, that's a great time to accumulate a position. Now you've got a bounce. These bounces really aren't worth buying where they're at now. They don't really confirm anything that you didn't already know. So if you didn't buy Apple kind of on the bounce, rebound, back test to highs, really no reason to get back into the stock right now. You could be simply kind of back testing to the upper channel line. You still got a ways to go in Apple. That's why markets look pretty good at the current time. Amazon sitting in the same position it's been in really since June. It's sitting on an area of resistance. It's not able to go up above it, but sellers haven't emerged and pushed this one lower. You're building a nice base with Amazon at this current price. We'll see which way it breaks later. If you tuned into last week's show, we talked about how Netflix was actually sitting on this purple line earlier in the week, and it was a very obvious area where buyers would step in. You'd get a move. I think you were up 4 or 5% this week. Tesla did a very similar thing, not the similar formation, but a similar type of bounce. And this is why we have two segments of the show, because when you look at Netflix's fundamentals, the fact that you've got a Hollywood strike, you've got the prospect of them not being able to have a lot of maybe newer content with their Hollywood studio type things, but there's a technical reason to buy these stocks as well, and you had a nice bounce with Netflix. Moving on to NVIDIA, holding this area up here. And this is actually really bullish. The fact that this stock's kind of re-rated itself to a new level, and it's held this level. You've got this big gap down here. Not a ton of volume or an escalation of volume at these levels. You actually had higher volume when the stock was on its decline. fact it's able to hold these levels is very, very, very bullish for the entire AI sector. Speaking of bullish, Google's chart just looks absolutely fantastic. I forget the guy. There was some guy on YouTube that was just pounding the table on this one from like 110 all the way down. I don't remember his name. He does a FAANG stock recap show every Friday. Here we are sitting at 135. That's like the easiest money you could have made. Same thing with Microsoft. Broke to highs, actually broke through, kind of back testing these highs, but there was an area of support which we bounced off here at 317. This area is not really convincing that we'll continue to move higher, but we could be building a base between, we'll call it 320 and up at 350 for Microsoft. And if you're like me and you believe Copilot will be a fantastic opportunity, you probably should know what you should be doing with Microsoft right now. And finally, Tesla back tested the purple line. We got our bounce. Stock's basically kind of just sitting out here in no man's land. You're looking for a push higher back up into the 308 region. A move lower, not really that alarming. You'll hit support again on this one. You have broken out from this purple line, and you've basically started to form this new uptrend here. As long as this green upland or uptrend line maintains itself, you should get a bounce here and move higher with Tesla in the coming weeks ahead. Hopefully, you guys enjoy today's video. Hopefully, you enjoy your 3-day weekend. Next week's video might be a little complicated. You'll find out later in the week why, but I'll try to post it on Friday. If I don't happen to have the chance to record the video on Friday, I will try to do it on the weekend. Got a busy week this week and weekend. I'll do my best to get this Friday video up because I don't think we've missed one in several years, and I don't intend to start this week. Hopefully you guys have a great holiday weekend. We'll see you again next week. Until then, good luck with your investments.